Good evening. This is the May 13th, 2024 meeting of the Design Review Commission. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Travis Causer, present.
Glenn Cass, present.
And John Gray, present.
Richard Stanton, present.
Okay, we only have one person absent today, Armin.
Chair Hadley has an excuse asked.
Okay. Second item is adoption of agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt or any corrections?
Move to adopt.
Do I have a second?
1 second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Next is public comments on items that are not on the agenda, but under the purview of this commission. Do we have any public comments on Zoom or present?
And reminding those on Zoom that you can dial *9. We do not have any public comment.
Thank you. Next on the consent calendar, we have minutes of meeting for March 25th. Do we have any changes or do I have a motion to approve?
No changes. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of March 25th.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have no study sessions tonight. We have no continuing public hearings tonight. New items, we have HDP 0623. Anna is our staff member, and this is on a project at 3493 Hamlin.
Thank you very much. The application before you tonight is for hillside development and design review over 17 feet in height, and this is the first hearing on it. The project site is located east off of Moraga Road and south of Stanley Middle School in the R10 zoning district. The lot is roughly just under 1/2 acre. The project proposes first and second story additions at the west end of the residence, which will increase the height from 16 feet to 22 feet 9 inches. The addition will have a hip roof while the existing residence will retain its gable roof. And to continue this new design along the facade, the new entryway design has a hip roof as well. The second story is stepped back from the first on 3 sides, and a bump out at the front helps create shadow and break up the appearance of mass. While the resulting design is not necessarily perfectly symmetrical, the new addition does not appear out of character or size from the existing home. Along Hamlin Road, there is one other 2-story home across the street from the project site. In the greater surrounding area, there are some additional examples of 2-story homes or 2nd-story elements on Solana Drive and Moraga Road. The neighborhood is made up mostly of single-story ranch-style homes, though there is a lot of variety when it comes to architectural details, colors, and materials. The project's increased floor area does remain consistent with the neighborhood character and will not appear out of place or detract from the surroundings. The applicant proposes new siding to replace much of the existing stucco and proposes a neutral tan and warm gray for the colors. The building is not set up into the hillside and will not be highly visible from off-site. When viewed from street level, existing trees along the roadway will offer screening. But the main view impact is expected to be to the adjacent neighbor at the west, and therefore staff recommends a condition of approval to plant screening trees near the west property line to aid in visually shielding the addition from the backyard to increase the neighbor's privacy. Shown here is the west elevation with the 2nd-story windows and deck highlighted. The applicant has taken steps to reduce privacy impacts by raising the sill height of the windows. The deck does present privacy concerns given that it will overlook part of the neighbor's backyard. While new trees will take time to grow, once established, those trees, as required by conditions of approval, will help reduce this impact. Staff received 2 public comments before the meeting tonight, one from a neighbor across the street in support of the project, and one from another neighbor who is concerned that the 2nd story will cause solar shading and that the proposed deck will impact privacy. Staff recommends a condition of approval to help reduce these privacy impacts by planting screening trees. Staff referred the application to EB Mud, the County Building Department, Con Fire, Central SAN, and the city engineer. The comments that We received back were standard and required no changes to the plans at this time. As previously mentioned, there is one project-specific condition of approval to plant at least 2 trees for screening at the west property line, with at least one of these being evergreen trees for year-round foliage. Staff can make the findings for hillside development, general design review, and design review over 17D. The proposal is consistent with the general plan land use designation of medium density, single family residential, and that the existing single family residential character will not change. It complies with the R10 zoning standards and is also consistent with the residential design guidelines regarding massing, building site. It will not impact offsite views and, as conditioned, will not unduly impact privacy. That concludes my presentation, and I am available for questions from the commissioners.
Chair, if I may interject, I apologize, I meant to speak before the presentation. Commissioner Causer, as he knows, is in range of this project within 500 feet and therefore must recuse himself from the project. It is typical that a recused commissioner leaves the room during deliberations. So if you would like to leave the room at this time, we will come and get you when the item is over. Thank you. Apologies for missing my cue earlier.
Okay, do we have any?
No question for
comments?
staff.
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, that opens it up for the applicant. You have 10 minutes to present.
And please introduce yourself and your relationship to the project.
Absolutely. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Donna Shivers. I am the architectural designer for the project, working with the Cardena family on the proposed partial second story and lower level addition. Also attending the meeting is the homeowner, Renzo Cardena, and I will reserve time for him to talk about their plans at the end of my presentation. Thank you, Anna, for your detailed review of the proposed plans and for your recommendation of approval. The design is consistent with the Lafayette design guidelines, does not exceed the maximum allowable height, does not require a variance or encroach into the allowable setbacks, and the lower level addition will be built on an existing flat area of the lot, which will not disturb the existing retaining wall or sloped area in the back of the lot. The overall exterior design is consistent with the look and feel of the existing neighborhood, including the 2-story home that is directly across the street, and the addition is designed to blend with and balance the existing house. I would like to provide additional information in 2 areas, privacy and drainage. So Anna, if you could show the proposed drainage plan and an image of the drainage ditch. Please. Right. Yeah, so specifically, the upper and lower level additions are built over existing impervious surface, and we've proposed catch basins and drain emitters that will direct runoff to the front landscape and into the existing drainage ditch and pipe that runs along the south edge of Hamlin Road. The catch basins are in the back and will direct drainage towards the front, so it follows the natural slope of topography, and there's an existing drainage ditch that runs under everybody's driveway that the drain emitters will naturally drain into. This plan has been reviewed by the city drainage engineers and no comments or revisions were proposed. And Anna, if you could show, and this is the drainage, this is a photo of the drainage ditch here that's existing. And it runs along the south edge of Hamlin Road. So the property's on that side of the road. And then Anna, if you could show sheet P2 with additional perspective views. The top view shows the sun path for today. That is for Lafayette 6 a.m. sunrise. As you can see at 6 a.m., the Cardena second story does not block any early morning light or views of the sunrise at all. And the bottom view, blow that one up, shows the proposed second story addition relative to the existing house located to the west. The second story addition faces 3501 Hamlin Road garage, and the proposed windows, which are 4'8" off of the finished floor, are located towards the front of the addition and front of the neighboring property. And so the bottom of the windows, again, are 4 feet high, and they're designed to let in light and ventilation. That gives you a pretty good idea of how the house sits relative to the next door neighbors there. Brenda?
Hello, I'm Renzo Pretty, the property owner. My wife had to work tonight, so she's actually teaching, couldn't be here. But just a little background, we live in a 2-bedroom home right now. We have 3 kids, 9, 6, and a 1-year-old. So the main goal for our project is to get more rooms. With the project, we'll get 2 extra bedrooms, so each child can have their own bedroom. And then the upstairs area is going to be used for an office. My wife works from home. I do a lot of work from home, sleeping. I have a really weird graveyard shift schedule. And you know, the purpose of the deck area is that, you know, we're fortunate in Hamlin, we have a lot of land, but the bad thing is we have a lot of slope. So by creating this addition, we lose a lot of flat space already. So the deck was just created to have a little space there. Yeah, I can address any questions directly about the project or more specifically about the details. But
Do you have an existing tree on the west side of the house?
there's a 3-inch or 2-inch Japanese maybe.
Little one.
Yeah, but no tree.
Would you be able to put up, Google map to show what the land, what's in the neighbor's backyard?
Oh, yeah.
Because
sorry, I'm on
we
screen.
visited the site, but we don't see the neighbors, what's in the neighbor's backyard.
So this is the subject property. And the hillside starts right behind the houses.
Any other questions for the
Yeah,
applicant?
I have a question and you touched on it, but in response to a neighbor's comment, I'd like to ask you just to explain, or further explain your logic to choosing to do a upper story addition rather than an extension of the house at the ground floor.
Good question. We sort of been working on this project for 2 years, back and forth. The city just getting ideas. And we initially proposed to go a little forward. We have a lot of parking space, but not technically under the parking guidelines. And we actually wanted to go forward to create either, you know, space for an office or an au pair for the children. But we couldn't do that because we had a lot of land in the back. And the problem with going backwards is there's a hillside there, and we would have to build on a slope, which is, you know, dangerous, costly. And so we just decided to go up a little bit and do it in that regard to get that extra space. Because I think once this is completed, we wouldn't have any more room or for any reasons to do any additional work to the house. So.
Okay, thank you.
Can
And
I share my screen for one moment? I pulled up a reference point to the hillside, the site section. Excuse me. Just to illustrate if that's helpful, the hillside behind the residence.
Yeah, they're pretty close already to that retaining wall. To be able to fit 2
And-
bedrooms and an office space.
and is the portion of the house on the left there, is that is addition?
That's the
That's the
That's
existing,
full house.
That's the existing house.
okay,
About
thank you.
4 feet, I think, or
And
4 feet.
then one more sort of specific question on your drawings. I was looking to understand where shadows might go. I was looking at your sheet A 0.1, which shows all the homes, and there's no north arrow on that. I wanted to confirm north is up.
Let's see.
Yes.
Correct.
North
Yeah.
is exactly up, so,
Yeah.
so clearly. In the winter, any shadow from your home would cast to the south and west in the morning.
Correct.
Not directly on the neighbor's garage. And then in the summer, you answered our question with what happens in the summer.
Correct.
So thank you.
Do you know how you're gonna stage construction? Because when I went by today, there's a lot of construction going on that street. And so the parking or traffic is already impaired on one side of the street.
Yeah.
If you impair it on the other side,
I didn't think about that. So I don't think it could be seen from an aerial view, but to the left of our property is a bunch of dirt, rocks, and I think a rosemary tree. And on our driveway, we can fit 4 cars and maybe 3 cars there, so technically we shouldn't use the street at all unless people are doing something quick. But for the most part, there's 3 spots for parking to the left of our property, and then in the U-shaped driveway, another 3 more spots.
Including space for a dumpster and a toilet area.
Yeah,
as
so-
well on the property.
So to the, behind that black car,
Mhm.
there's
okay.
a 20, yeah, that whole area.
Mhm.
Okay,
So I did not see any landscape drawings in your documents. Correct me if I'm wrong. What is your intent regarding landscape?
We were gonna change the landscape, the front has a couple of flowers, but for the most part, it was just gonna remain as
We are
is.
proposing to leave the landscape as is.
I think you're gonna find construction after you're done. It's not gonna be as is anymore.
In repair, when we do the drain emitters, then we're gonna have to dig the drainage ditch coming from the back to the front. But you know, nothing new that is gonna be a huge change from what you see now is proposed.
And do you have a response for the staff's recommendation to do some landscape work in the back?
The trees, yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
Your response is fine.
Yeah, we're okay.
Have you thought about what kind of trees?
Yeah, I know I don't know if I'm saying the right word, coniferous, the kind of tall. I'm not sure of the terminology, but
Something to be evergreen, something that would be full foliage, that would, you know, provide nice privacy all year round, not lose the leaves. That we would need to confer with probably a landscape designer, landscape architect on what would be the proper tree for that area, because it is pretty heavily shaded back there.
Okay, any last? Okay, now open to public comments on this project. And I have no speaker slips. If you want to speak, please fill out one. You can start, but please give me one
You
before
can fill
you.
it out after your call.
Already filled it out, so they didn't stay there, I just thought it was up here, so. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael, you have what, 3 minutes?
Good evening, my name is Michael Ween, I'm here with my spouse Joy Ween. I live at 3505 Hamlin Road, which is 2 doors down to the right of this project. And I wanted to provide some commentary because it impacts more than just the next door neighbor. It does impact us as the second there, as we're on the west side as well of this. So when we originally bought our home 16 years ago, part of the real appeal of it was not only the nice, great trees down the way, but also the privacy in the backyards. And that everybody, when you went into your backyard, felt that they were in their own little cocoon. And this project potentially totally changes that. So you guys have talked about the projects. On our street between Hamlin Road and Solano Road, there's 27 homes. During the time we've lived there in 16 years, there's been 16 major remodels with expanded space, just expanded space ones. Only one has actually gone to above 17 feet. And that was not well received in the community. It got through, but nobody really enjoys the way that has disrupted the property, the sightlines and the privacy on the street. So I know that it exists, but it was certainly controversial then. It remains controversial today. And as one of the things is it because now people have a chance to look into the backyards. I appreciate that we've upped the windows at a suggestion that was put earlier in here, but putting a 16 by 16 deck on the back, which right now, if you look back at those pictures, looks into my backyard, into my pool area, we've tiered our backyard, so it's right in line with everything that they could see. And I think that's a really detriment to our personal enjoyment of things. And then not only that, you're gonna have increased noise now because that sound is just gonna carry and bounce off those hills. Everybody else on our street has been able to figure out how to expand space without going up almost, in almost all cases. And I just think that have we really thought this through and tried that out? If, oh, I'm gonna use into my back space. Well, you could tier your yard. If you're gonna use into your back space, well, if you want it for in-house, you now have to build a deck on top of your property. That's a challenge for the rest of us to endure. So I didn't know if there were any questions.
Too,
Yeah.
for others.
It's
On
just
the
gonna
small houses on our block will have the potential with this remodel to go up.
Okay,
Would you mind stating your name for the record?
I'm Joy Ween. It's my husband, Michael Ween.
Thank you.
okay, thank you, Michael. Do we have any other comments?
There are no attendees on Zoom.
Okay,
There were written comments too that weren't read.
Those are published with.
those are
agenda,
published
so.
with the agenda, yes. Okay, open it up for commissioner comments. Who would like to start this evening? Richard?
Well, I guess I'm rather torn. As far as the design goes, it's an attractive design. I don't have issues with the design. As far as having neighbors that aren't in favor of the project, I guess one, I'm surprised that they weren't talked to or that they seem to be caught unaware. So that's the concern. So I don't know. Guess I'm conflicted. I'm interested in hearing what both of you have to say.
All right, I'll go next then.
Okay,
And that's right, Travis doesn't get to say anything.
No,
Visually, I'm comfortable with the design. I'm not sure I agree with the decision to put shakes on that center bay. It draws a lot of attention to it, and there's nothing else like it. I like the breaking of the mask, but personally, I find the contrast stronger than I would prefer. The key issue clearly is the deck and the ability to see from the deck into neighbors' yards, and we're told it's more than 1 yard away. I think that's a very valid concern. Can it be dealt with? I think probably yes, that the house can stay the general configuration proposed here, but mitigation measures can be taken to be sure that there is privacy. Is 2 trees enough? Maybe it is. I would suggest they both, not just one, should be evergreen. But the question is that enough? And I think it's worth seeing a little visual study of that. I also wonder if putting some sort of an arbor on the side of that deck to create privacy screening that's built into the house, right close to the deck, if there would be value there. Something planted, but that would really separate the view, the ability to view from the deck off to the west. I think it's worth demonstrating to your neighbors that you've addressed their concerns, and I would like to see a study of that at a subsequent meeting.
yeah, I sort of concur with John at, I visited the site, so there is no tree that's already there to shield it. And it was difficult to project what the views are because also there was no cross-sectional view or anything that I could look out in the plans and see progressively what was going to shield there. I think that the arbor is probably a good suggestion because it helps to solve the issue about the trees growing up and getting to a substantial height. Although when I go and look across the street at the 2-story that's there, they have some substantial trees that separate them from the adjoining property. And so it is, you know, it's possible to well shield the privacy from that standpoint. As far as two-story in your neighborhood, you know, we have some Senate bills that have been passed. We have no control over certain aspects. It could happen at any time, whether we rejected this project or not, it could happen at any time in your neighborhood. It's just the nature of the housing needs in California and what's been adopted by the state. Do we need to see this come back, or can we have staff review it, or what?
I think it should come back. I think the burden is really on the applicant to give this some more consideration based on what you heard tonight. I mean, you could get rid of the deck in the back. I'm just gonna throw out some options, right? Still get all the interior space you want. You don't have the outside deck. Maybe that's a mitigation. You need to think that through. When I asked what sort of trees you're gonna plant, I mean, staff has already pointed out, okay, how about trees for screening? You should have had an answer for that as to what are you gonna plant? That's it. How big is it gonna get? And how's that gonna screen, and see if that's adequate. Otherwise, you know, your neighbors don't know, we don't know what's gonna go there, what you're gonna do. So I think the ball's really in your court to think through what's been talked about and bring it back to us. I think, given that there's neighborhood concerns, I think it would be appropriate for them to bring it back.
Yeah, I agree.
So can we have a resolution for continuance?
Yeah. So I'll move to continue this to a time. Can you be back in 2 weeks, or do you need, which means only 1 week to prepare? Or you want 3 weeks to prepare to be back in 4 weeks?
It is likely that the next meeting is canceled. We did not have any other items, and we have staff that are absent. So we would then continue it to the early June meeting.
Which is the 10th.
Right, yeah, the 10th of June,
The next, yeah,
next year's meeting. So when would you need drawing back for that?
the,
Third.
yeah, ideally the 3rd. This is May, I'm looking at May. By the 31st, ideally. If that's possible.
What is the meeting date after?
So there's the 10th, and there's also the 24th in June.
You're so, we want to defer them to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have.
So it's the first meeting in July.
First meeting of July, it's the second Monday, so that would be the 8th of July.
We plan for July 8th.
We absolutely can. I just want to put on the record that the PSA, the Permit Streamlining Act deadline for a decision is June 10th. That can be extended for a one-time of 90 days, and that can be arranged with between staff and the applicant to allow for that extended time before the commission makes a decision.
I'd also like to point out that July 8th is Monday after the July 4th long weekend, and see if there's general plans to be in town on that day from commissioners here present.
Yeah, no.
I'll be back.
Okay, so who wants to finish up the motion? Or just asking for a continuance and asking for revision on the plans for shielding the neighbors. Do I have a second on that?
Second, you bet.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. See you in July. Okay, next agenda item is the tree ordinance. And I don't know how to phrase it otherwise. Other than Arlie is going to do the staff presentation. And then we'll open up for comments.
Give me one moment to get connected.
Oh, did we bring Travis with them?
Yeah.
Oh. You know,
I was in the meeting once where someone was forgotten outside.
Oh, that's so sad.
Actually outside.
And they were still there.
cold too, like,
Would be a clue when everyone leaves the room.
Yeah.
Welcome back. How'd that go? It went fine. Okay. They're gonna move down. No. Okay, tree ordinance.
Share screen. Good evening, commissioners. Tonight I am presenting an update to you on the tree protection ordinance update effort. This was kicked off in April with a joint city council and planning commission meeting. And we are now well into the progress. So for our background, our current tree protection ordinance was first adopted in 2003 and was amended twice in 2010 and 2014, which is now 10 years ago. Our recent safety element that was updated and adopted in 2023 has numerous policies regarding defensible space, including a specific program S-4.4.3 to evolve the tree protection ordinance to address fire risks created by dead, dying, and non-native trees. So our ordinance is specifically called out for further action there. And then lastly, the city council recently updated its priorities for the coming fiscal year to include wildfire prevention, preparedness and responsiveness, and utility safety. For all these reasons, an update to the tree protection ordinance seems timely at this moment. Looking at the general work plan and timeline, we are through April and the project initiation. Community engagement continues. Our survey was published to the website just last week. You may have seen it in the weekly roundup. Research and analysis continues through May, and we are hoping by June or July to have developed alternatives for some of the changes to the code. The plan is to hold a joint city council and planning commission meeting to discuss the alternatives prior to getting into the nitty-gritty of language changes. So we'll talk about replacement tree numbers without the ordinance language around how that works being developed. We'll look at late summer for the ordinance development with a fall schedule for hearings and adoptions. This is our goal. We are planning robust community engagement, including specific stakeholder outreach. We're working with a consultant, excuse me, I didn't mention that earlier. Heather Coleman of Code Words is a zoning update consultant. She is working with us and has already reached out to numerous individual stakeholders, including Confire, arborists, our own city landscape consultant, and others. As I mentioned, the survey is up. It will be open through the end of May. We already have over 40 responses. We did mention it in the weekly roundup. We will continue to remind people of it and of course of all the meetings that will take place. And our public meetings will include not only the April kickoff that took place, the joint meeting I mentioned, hopefully in mid to late summer, and then of course the approval process, I'm assuming will be 1 to 2 meetings each of the planning commission and the city council. We've grouped the key topics into a series of titles here that we'll go through in more detail. So we'll talk about protected trees, replacement trees, streamlined process, wildfire management, and downtown and infrastructure. And apologies, I've actually rearranged these topics on the next slides to more closely mirror the staff report that you received. So looking at protected trees, we're specifically looking at whether the size and species criteria should stay the same. Trees on previously approved plans, as you know, any tree shown on a plan becomes protected, including normally non-protected species and sizes. And of course, trees on vacant lots, all trees are protected when a lot is vacant. So that gives us a lot of protected trees to work with. As far as wildfire management, the goal here is to balance the environmental benefits of trees with the pressures from fire risk and defensible space. We're also hearing from applicants about insurance needs and tree trimmings on that front. We want to look at the easing of restrictions for removal of flammable tree species and coordinating with Confire on their now updated defensible space requirements. We'll look at the regulations that apply to downtown and consider whether it would be appropriate to have different regulations for different areas. It would be possible to have downtown as an area, the very high fire hazard severity zone as an area, and the remainder, generally the south end of town, as a third area where different regulations might apply. We also want to look at the conflicts between trees and utilities and infrastructure, especially in the downtown. Looking at replacement trees, we want to consider the number or ratio of replacement trees required, creating more objective requirements. Right now, the ordinance provides for case-by-case discretion, which has resulted in some unhappiness in different applications. So we want to get more objective there. We want to look at developing a recommended tree list for what is appropriate replacement trees would be, and how to ensure that those trees are planted, and at the same time considering appropriate planting windows, which are not all year round. And then finally, looking at process, we want to look at the emergency process we have for removal of hazardous trees, trees that are removed to create defensible space, street trees, and whether those should have their own consideration or requirements, tree removal applications from agencies besides the city, and how to calculate the measurement of multi-trunk trees. These are all items within the ordinance that we want to clarify and make easier to understand and implement. So then the questions for you today, there's no action to take, merely feedback to provide to staff. The two questions in our staff report are, what would you like to see come out of this update? And do you agree with the list of key issues I just went through? Are there any issues on the update that we should prioritize or that you thought were missing? That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. My recommendation is simply to provide feedback.
Okay, do we have questions? I think questions are gonna be like comments, but.
Clarifying questions, I can take them, or we can
Clarifying
just go to public
questions.
comment.
Well, I have something that would be a question, not a
Okay.
comment. I'm glad to hear you're considering, or the city is considering, sort of tree fire hazard inherent in tree species, as a factor in whether trees should be on a list. Are things open to consideration such as, say, that taking the bay laurel completely off the protected species list, even though it's native, because it's a fire hazard tree?
That is something we also heard from the arborist, more because it's a vector for sudden oak death.
Well, that's true. That's a second
Secondary
reason
consideration.
to, I wish I could just see them all gone.
We are open to any suggestions, and anything that seems to have general support will probably make it to the alternatives, which will then be discussed by the approving bodies. So open to the suggestions.
Is part of this at all, requirements for fire mitigation as part of approving projects? You know, if a homeowner or a business owner is doing work on their land and the city identifies that for whatever, whether there's species or condition of trees that are a fire hazard, is that being considered to become a requirement of a project approval?
Yes, so one of the items mentioned in key issues is we actually have an established list of flammable trees. So the city already has this on its website. It's a little buried right now, but we could reference this list and create special exemptions for not requiring a permit for removal of such flammable species. Is that
But would the city ever actually proactively require the removal of them as opposed to giving the property owner the option? As part of, if there is a project ongoing where, you know, construction is happening.
That's certainly something that we can look at. It's also something that I think the DRC could consider suggesting and or requiring individually as projects are considered.
Yeah, I would not be comfortable with us having the discretion to require that. I think that leads to good potential unfairness. But I still think it would be a good idea generally.
Wonderful. Any further questions before public comment?
No questions from. Okay, public comments? No one on Zoom?
In the room? No one in Zoom? Okay, no
Okay.
public comment.
Commissioner comments? Who wants to start?
Well, I have comments. So I don't mind starting. So my two concerns, one, good landscape design. Secondly, fire safety and defensible space. I think that there's an opportunity as part of this effort, and I'm glad that the city's taken it on. To think about the way the current ordinance works to either help or hinder good landscape design. I'm of the opinion that it hinders it. And I want that to be specific, residential construction or either new or remodels, where they're taking out protected trees to clear either for building a new home or to do an addition. The replacement, the mitigation that's required as to the numbers of replacement trees, I think is unreasonable. And ends up that we've seen, or at least I've seen in my relatively limited time on this commission, that they come in with a landscape architects, fully designed landscape. And then in addition, they have to go plant 6 additional trees or 10 additional trees. And that they need to be native trees, which tend to be oaks, which tend to be very large trees. And in my opinion, too large for the locations that they end up being crammed in, which is sort of my terms. So in my opinion, it currently is driving poor landscape design and rather than good landscape design. And so I would be in favor, what I would hope to see out of it is that the end product addresses that to allow for good landscape design. And I mean, I love trees as much as anybody. I love good landscape design. And to me, that means having the right tree in the right location that has space for it to grow. And if you're, and you know, to its full size, which means that you have considerations such as solar access for solar panels or future solar panels or neighbor solar panels. You know, how does that work? And fire safety, you know, you don't have trees that are hanging over the roofs. That's one of the current things with insurance is not having trees hanging over roofs of your home. Anyway, so I think that I guess what I would hope for is that there's that gets addressed. And so, as you know, Arlie, at least that I was on another architecture review commission for the city of Pleasant Hill for many years. The way Pleasant Hill does it is if it is a development project, meaning you have a new building going in where there wasn't anything, or it is a major remodel of a building, they don't apply the mitigation standards. They essentially exempt it. And so that what we would review when I was on that commission is the landscape. But now, I mean, you'd have an arborist that would come in and do a survey of the trees, would identify are they in good condition, how many were taken out, you know, so you would have all that same information, but it would be reviewed as, is this a good landscape design? And to me, that's what I feel like we're kind of missing the boat on here. On the fire safety, I mean, everybody north of Highway 24 is in the very high hazard area, including me. So that's certainly a huge topic right now. And what I would ask there is the current definition of defensible space, and hopefully you will get input on that, but the current definition I don't think is a good definition. So I think that really should be looked at and in my opinion sort of revised, certainly the wording on it.
Can I ask for further clarification of what you think is not good or would improve it?
Yes, I think it's not accurate. So in that you would have to you know, reference. So right now it says something to the effect of, oh, I don't know, I'm not gonna be able to find it here right away, but the tree removals are usually not required, is that sort of a term. Trees hanging over homes is usually acceptable as long as you trim the lower limbs. It has that sort of wording in it, and I think that's not true. If you look at least the fire safety information that I've seen, I don't think that's true. And so
Yeah, that's not consistent with state recommendations.
yeah, and the local fire district, even in their fire safety, wildfire safety things. So I think that needs to be looked at. Just one more comment. I'm sorry, you notice there's a. One of my things. So in conflicts between trees and utilities, and you got the statement of particularly in downtown, so it's not really just limited to downtown. Unfortunately, one of the things that happens is PG&E comes along and, you know, I've had it happen to me, I've seen it in the neighbors, you know, you have a tree that's near the power lines, it gets turned into this, you know, thing like that, you know, the weird pruning. And in my case, it wasn't a protected tree, and I'm like, I'm just gonna remove the tree because I don't want it in the electric lines and stuff. So I think it really is an issue. But the other thing that was just recently talked about was the tree trimming that they did along the escape routes, you know, which was fairly significant, at least in my street over in north side of town. And
I mean, the evacuation routes, is that correct?
yes, the evacuation routes, yes. So, and as far as a list of recommended trees, there's a lot of emphasis here on native trees, and I'm of the opinion, I don't think they're the best solution in many of the designs that we see when it's a new development. So I would just say some caution there, because the list of native trees is truly pretty limited of true native trees. There's probably people with misunderstandings of what's native and what's not, but it's really pretty limited. In my opinion, there are a lot of trees that could be better suited to locations rather than live oaks and valley oaks and the ones that at least I keep seeing. So I think those are my comments.
Thank you.
Who wants to go next?
I already talked, you can, one of you guys.
You know, I would disagree with a lot of that, candidly. But I don't have specifics. I do think that native trees for this location are what's best. And although it may take time for them to mature, I do feel like that's what's best for this community. But I do concur that when the utility comes along and cuts through the center of a tree, my ask would be that the city requests that the utility not cut them horizontally, rather that they cut them at an angle so that the water can filter off. Because how you kill a tree, and I'm sure you're all aware, is when the water rests on a flat surface and it just goes down. PG&E and whoever they hired don't care very much about when or where they cut the tree. I think the city could intervene or interject and make sure that they cut them properly. That would be ideal to me, but I know that's a big ask. That's my only comment.
Okay. I should have gone first because this is going to be redundant because I just want to make sure I covered all these items. Okay. So first item, fire hazard. I agree with the idea of putting together the list of trees to eliminate. And I also agree that we need to resolve what the clear zone is, you know, and what the definition of clear zone, you know, is it overhanging? Is it overhanging 5 years from now? You know, what exactly, you know, selected species that may be in the clear zone, other species that may not be in the clear zone.
Can I clarify, when you say cleared zone, do you mean defensible space?
Defensible
Or do you
space,
mean zone 0?
defensible space.
Thank you.
I think we need to look at the cost associated with these requirements. I think that when, say, for instance, someone takes down a bay tree, they're not always that big. But when they take down a Monterey pine and it's 22-inch diameter, you're paying $5,000, $10,000 to have it taken down. So I don't think the city should be punitive after that cost, adding on requirements for replacement trees or anything like that. So I think most of the fire defensible trees that need to be removed should be removed at no additional cost other than the arborist cost, or, you know, the arborist cost to take it down.
And I would just chime in, I agree with that one.
I think that removal of dead trees needs to occur at the beginning of construction projects. We had particularly one in our neighborhood that, they had 5 Monterey pines, and they thought they were gonna leave them there the entire time until they didn't sell the house. And then what they did is they twisted PG&E's arm to take them down, and PG&E cut them down and threw the big logs in the backyard, and the house didn't sell. Finally, when they got a new realtor in, the case said, get rid of this and you'll sell the house. They sold the house. Okay, and it's an ongoing thing on the PG&E removal stuff. I've never had it myself in that regard, but it seems like what they do is they take down the tree or they take it down to a totem pole, and they just leave everything there unless you pay extra to get it hauled off your property. And somehow a lot of neighbors think that they have entitled to not pay anything and just leave it there, you know. I don't want to go into long stories, but it's a frequent ongoing problem. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I agree with the Sudden Oak about the bay. I wanted to have that in. I thought that, you know, looking at what would require something that, you know, a permit or no permit. I mean, ideally, no permit, but sometimes you might have a really large tree and you want to make sure that they've evaluated everything before the arborist comes in with the cheapest price to take it down, you know? So I do think that we should have maybe a scaled system. So under this diameter, no permit required. For these species over this diameter, it may be prudent for the neighbors to, you know, have some protection from other than the arborist that's doing, you know, the cheapest arborist that's doing what they're doing. Undeveloped lots. I don't agree with the current policy that everything is protected, okay? Because that encourages trees that are non-compatible to be there on the property. And I also don't agree, to me, it's punitive. I think back of that property on Los Erebus, you know, that was highly sloped and had a gazillion trees on it. Of course, it was never developed, you know? And so then you calculate it and it says, okay, give me 65 trees. You know, there's no way to put 65 trees on their property. And then they start talking about putting in bigger block species, but it's a hillside, and that's not compatible with digging up and prepping the area sufficiently to have it. So I think that we need to look at those properties. I think we need to consider the slope of the property and also some policy that is way different than what we have now.
For replacement tree numbers.
Yeah, for replacement tree numbers for that situation. I think we should have penalties for non-permit removals. Last week, my 2 doors down from me, neighbor cut down 3 large oak trees to improve their view of Mount Diablo Boulevard. I mean, Mount Diablo.
I was gonna say not the other.
Mount Diablo. I'm sorry. No, not Mount Diablo Boulevard. They see that too, but I think that we need to have something that addresses that as well.
Right now, what teeth are there in enforcement?
We do not have a specific fee for tree removal. We do have fees for non-responsiveness to code enforcement, but it's a simple fee. It does increase over time. So if someone said my neighbor's cut down a tree without a permit, our code enforcement officer goes out, it's clear that that's true. They're required to get the permit retroactively and do the replacement trees or pay the mitigation fees, or in lieu fees, excuse me, one or the other. And if they don't, there are fees for not complying, but there's not a fee specifically for cutting down a tree without a permit.
So you can bust your neighbor, but it's still not the right answer.
you know, it's a really hard thing to do because you bust your neighbor and they know who bust them. You go to Confire and they don't respond. I can tell you, they do not respond, okay? You email them, you knock on the door at the fire station, they do not respond.
With what type of request?
Well, the house with the 5 Monterey Pines, okay? They were all dead. They were considered an extreme fire hazard. And in fact, a car immediately crossed the street on a Saturday night. They had an oil change. They didn't screw on the filter correctly. It leaked. It went on the hot engine and had a fire, okay? They were able to get the fire out fast enough, okay? If it had gone 10 minutes, that new house would have been gone as well. Okay, I mean, it literally was almost right underneath those trees. Okay, and we contacted Confire as a way of getting rid of them. And I had 16 people contact Confire. And they did not respond to a single one of us. Either email or send in your comment, weed abatement or the comment. They did nothing. Okay, my wife went down and knocked on the door, left a message. They never called back. They never emailed back. They never got back. And then PG&E came and left everything there. Okay. I would like to see a wider variety of species. Okay. Now,
Protected trees.
replacement trees. Okay. I agree. Everything is live oaks if you want it green. Valley oaks, otherwise, strawberry trees and rosebuds, okay? And
Redbuds.
Huh?
Redbuds.
I'm sorry, redbuds. That's all we see. I mean, literally, that's all we see over and over again, It's not that I have problems with those, but I for instance, on my property, I have a blue oak, a black oak, and a cork oak, including a valley oak and a live oak. So that I have 5 species of oak on my property, they're different. They look different. They're nice to have something that's different. I hate strawberry trees. And again, what Rich had said is that, yeah, you get this, you get the requirement now on a new development. Okay, so you took out this tree. Okay, we want 24 trees. Well, what are you going to put in? Redbud. You create a hedge almost of redbuds, okay, to get the trees on your property versus someone else's. It doesn't look at what is the longer term growth of those trees and how, so the trees are so intermingled with each other. They're all fighting for canopy space, My live oak is become horizontal, because the other neighbors' trees are growing faster and bigger than my live oak can grab sunlight. So yeah, so not enough consideration given to the 20-year growth or longer. I think we need to address the fair and equitable, and you talked about that, okay? Determination of the circumference, that needs to be fixed, and the fair and equitable about, the discretional thing, like, oh, we don't have to ask for 65 trees, we can have, but then the neighbor who got caught with the 65 trees doesn't think that they were treated fair, So I'd like to have less of that on the burden on us and more in the ordinance. That's pretty much it.
I don't have quite as much to say as Glenn did. I actually agree. I agree with everything you said, so thank you. I read the ordinance and it's kind of interesting where we've come. The purpose of the ordinance, as it was described in the text, is to mitigate what was a problem decades ago, that our big, beautiful kind of heritage trees were at risk with people coming in and doing projects. And And we understand that. I mean, I say, well, yeah, I mean, big beautiful oaks are, you know, an investment in nature that's taken sometimes 100 years. And there's value there, there's character there. So how do you fit these giant heritage trees in a place with the scale and density of development that we have here? I mean, there's no way to do it without having these over your rooftop, and that's a danger. That is a hazard. You know, there are places in town that the lots just are not large enough to have these trees along with development. And you know, so while I appreciate the intent of the original intent of the tree ordinance, I struggle with how to maintain that and continue to provide housing density as we're mandated to, and to allow homeowners to do work on their property. I would like to see the big trees protected. I would like to see big trees remain a part of the visual experience of Lafayette. But as Richard suggested, smaller trees are much more practical when working around construction. And putting a smaller tree in that's going to turn into a great big tree over time is problematic, or can be. So how does the tree ordinance address that? I don't know. That's definitely hard to maintain, you know, some of the big, beautiful heritage live oaks and valley oaks that we have that have, you know, a diameter of 100 feet. I mean, you know, that doesn't get replaced anytime quick. But if we're going to be requiring numbers of trees to be replaced, they have to be smaller. And are there any of our native species on our preferred list that just don't grow to be that big? And you know, what are those?
Strawberry.
Strawberries, huh?
And red buds.
I couldn't get a red bud I couldn't get a red bud to live on my property. It died. I tried my best.
I'll give you a plan. I'll give you.
You give me some advice on it. There was a drought winter.
I get 100 seeds a year that are sprouting.
So, you know, I guess how do we? I mean, I'm not going to say again that the things that Glenn said, because I mean, I think that was well thought out. How do we balance the original intent with the reality of what it is to develop in suburban, you know, a suburban place like this? You know, on the properties that have a lot of land, then maybe it can be done. And I certainly would encourage and even mandate on larger properties with the room to require that the big trees get saved. You know, if there are big, beautiful trees, that's not where you put the house, and you don't even put the house that near to it. But what happens otherwise?
And I would just add to that, and if it's being redeveloped to plant new oak trees, I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, don't get me wrong about oak trees. I have a couple of valley oaks in my backyard. I have a live oak in my front yard, but my live oak in my front yard, I have an acre of land. I have 50 feet or more, you know, that the tree is growing in, and it's big and beautiful. But that's not what I see when it's like, oh, we're going to put 6 new live oak trees in this little space, so they're never going to grow up and be, it's not going to be good design. That's where I go back to the way they're going to be big trees. They need to have space around them, and the right tree in the right location can be beautiful, and the wrong trees can be awful when they're all crammed together and they're not healthy, they don't grow well, and you know, all that. That's my thoughts.
There was one question or suggestion raised by council about what if we allowed replacement trees to be planted off-site? Right now, all replacement trees must go on-site or mitigation fees are paid. What if we allowed applicants to pay for the tree and pay for its planting, and it went on city property? Or a neighbor that agrees where there's room? Is that something that you would be open to?
I think
Well,
that's silly.
We've actually done that. On
With permission from the neighbor, or?
yes, on the controversial, or the
Yeah, I
one
know the
that
one
the
you're talking
former mayor owned and it came back and Sun, on two S's.
Sierra Vista,
Sierra Vista and Sessions.
right,
Sessions.
way up in the.
Yeah, and
east side of
we had the developer put trees on, when they do it, the project, on the neighbor's, property.
With the agreement of the neighbor, of course.
Yeah, with an agreement of the neighbor. And we actually had a similar one on, we had one. It was one of those developments that we had like 5 different lots and they all showed up at different times, not Lucas Ranch, but one of the ones that is in the flatlands near Hamlin or
Upper
whatever.
Happy Valley, was it?
No, it wasn't it was on the other side of the freeway.
What's the objective? The objective is to check the box that you plant the tree. So why on a neighbor's parcel?
Well, in the case of that neighbor is that they wanted no visibility, you know, and the problem is that there were already established landscaping on the property that was being developed.
Right. So they come
And the logical place of screening was in an open area on the neighbor's property. Put him up here and then you'll have the tree, you know? So we'll buy the tree, we'll plant the tree and you water the tree, you know?
You know, I think that there are occasional times when there's gonna be an opportunity to do that is to everybody's benefit, but I suspect it's not gonna be typical.
I think it would
I'm
be
not
taken
sure.
advantage of.
I'm not sure
Candidly.
it's the kind of, it would turn into a go-to answer.
Mhm.
When there's not room on a property owner's site. Are there city properties that the city feels would really be enhanced with more planting? Or is this just a way to make it easier to deal with mitigation concerns that are difficult to meet?
Excellent questions.
I'm not an advocate for it not being specific to a project. Okay, but like putting a tree on the right of way somewhere where I don't even live isn't any good. Well, it may be good, but it's not.
It doesn't seem related
Yeah,
to the project.
Yeah, I don't wanna be making those decisions unrelated to the project.
Wonderful.
It sort of reminds me of the housing thing. Oh, we'll take care of that. We'll put it over here. It won't be in our development. You know. We'll buy this cheap apartment and turn it into subsidized. Well, wait a minute, we didn't get any new apartments. You know?
Any final comments or feedback? I'm available by email.
Okay.
If there's anything further.
I mean, I think it is very timely to be doing this. I appreciate that the city is making this a priority. I mean, I wouldn't have minded being sooner, but I'm glad to see it happening. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess one last comment on the streamlining.
Mhm.
So many of my neighbors have lost insurance because of trees, okay, among other things, but the trees. We need a streamlining process so that when they make a decision, because they actually had like 90 days to get this out, you know, take down this 2 oak trees next door in 90 days or we're canceling your insurance, you know?
Wow.
I would say one comment. I worry that the current state of affairs in the insurance industry is kind of begging us to act prematurely to the tree situation. Not that it's not overdue. I'm just saying, I think, you know, State Farm leaving La Miranda abruptly and leaving, 60% of their carrier or their clients without insurance as of May. I think it's important that we pause and not blame the trees for what may be a temporary, you know, financial inconvenience.
Okay, if we're done with that item, next on the agenda. ARC volunteer, I can volunteer.
Okay.
And then we have staff liaison report,
Do not have the report.
and then we have adjournment.
Oh, I apologize. Just to reiterate that, next DRC meeting is, I think, officially canceled now due to lack of items.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
See
you.
Thank you so much for your feedback.